We have much better audio this year. We're not dependent on the hotel's stuff, and so Lawrence has got the rig down here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Fiction and RPGs, and Tony Andarian is moderating. I couldn't think of the word.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. So hi everybody. This.
Your mics are turned on. There's a switch on there.
Oh yeah. Let's do some checking before we get started.
Heavy breathing activated.
Okay. I'm Tony Andarian. I'm going to be moderating this panel, which is fiction and RPGs. I'll start by introducing the topic with reading from the description, which goes as follows. Role-playing games have important elements in common with books and other forms of fiction, but there are crucial differences between them as well. How does one tell a story in an RPG? What is the relationship between RPGs and traditional fiction? What do they share as entertainment and storytelling experiences, and how are they distinctive? This panel will discuss some of those questions, considering RPGs both in the tabletop and video game mediums. And that last part I want to emphasize a little bit, because I know that for many people, our role-playing is the tabletop style experience where you have a game master running a game for people. And for others, it is the writing of a video game where you prepare a whole series of possible events that could be experienced by the players. The design and play experiences between them are in some respects different, and I wanted to make certain to give both of those an opportunity to be discussed. So I'm going to go down the panel and start by asking people to introduce themselves. I'll just say that I am, again, I'm Tony Andarian. I am the retired computer scientist and the author of the Sanctum of the Archmage indie published novels and games. My experience in RPGs is that some number of years ago, I got interested in using the Neverwinter Nights game engine. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with that, but it was a D&D-based computer game released in 2002 that came with an adventure-building toolset. And as it turned out, a lot of people who were frustrated game designers made use of that to develop an entire ecosystem of indie computer games using the engine. Hundreds and hundreds of good quality games, and some of which were frankly better than the professional games being developed by the studios in some respects. And so I was involved in that community for a number of years, and I developed 2 role-playing games based on the same story that is being written in my novels. The Sanctum of the Archmage role-playing games for Neverwinter Nights that did very well, got some critical acclaim, and helped put me on the road to saying I really need to put this down as books as well as games. So that's my background in designing computer games in particular. I was also a D&D, first edition AD&D DM for many years prior to that, but that's going further back into history.
It's going way back.
Yeah.
It's old school. OG. My name is Alexander Macris. I've worked in both the video game industry and the tabletop game industry. I was a child prodigy of Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of a waste of a prodigy, but there you go. Started being a DM when I was age 5. I was in the video game industry for a little bit over a decade, consulted on a bunch of massive multiplayer role-playing games, ran a video game website called The Escapist that did pretty well. After I was brutally canceled by the forces of the left, I retired from the video game industry and went into the tabletop game industry, and now I have a company called Autark where I publish Adventure Conqueror King system, which has kickstarted and done quite well for itself. Oh, and I'm the author of a book called Arbiter of Worlds, which is about how to be a dungeon master.
Oh, nice. My name's Joe Lewis. I am I started playing around 11 or 12 years old. That was some time ago. I actually started off with the white box set. Yeah, and then, I'm real OG. And then I went into the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the red box, blue box, or whatever, all of that back then. And been playing D&D. I did not play 4th edition.
Good man.
Yeah. And played just a bunch of other stuff. Also tabletop miniature wargamer. I've played a lot of things, Starfleet Battles. I don't know if anything this means to anyone. Advanced Squad Leader. I played those competitively. Did very well. I've done some stuff with Flames of War, which is a World War II miniature game. But if you're not into that genre, it doesn't really mean anything. It means a lot to me. I got a lot of trophies and plaques. I actually had a Neverwinter Nights server also called Midgarth. It was based off of Norse mythology. Had a good. It wasn't that popular, but I had like 20 or 30 people on any given time, so it was pretty nice. I did that when I became a father, so I wasn't going anywhere. So I created the world. So Neverwinter Nights is pretty cool. Played a couple other video games, but yeah, that's my background.
I'm Herman P. Hunter. I write fantasy books. Does this thing actually work? Yes. Okay. I write fantasy books. A lot of it was inspired by D&D. When I was a kid, I played a lot of D&D, the original one. I even had some of the old floppy books.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The modules.
Yeah. Well, no, not the modules. The actual, the first monster manual. Yeah. And I had them taken away from me routinely by my parents because I wasn't doing well in school. So, and of course, over the years, I still play Dungeons and Dragons online today. There were like 3 Dungeons and Dragons different video games that were massively multiplayer RPGs, MMORPG. But I think the only one that still has a valid user base is DDO, Dungeons and Dragons Online. So, and I'm there quite a bit actually. So, but I don't get kicked out of school for it anymore.
I'm MD Boncher. I write in 2 different series: the Tales from the Dream Nebula, which is pulp punk science fiction, and the Akinawazi Saga, which is dark epic fantasy. Which incidentally was inspired by the introduction of one of my players to a new campaign where in a setting that the GM didn't have monks, so he just said, well, you walk out of the midst, so introduce yourself. And I introduced my character, and there was like, there's something there. And that inspired my entire fantasy setting. But I am not quite the prodigy as you. I started playing when I was 9, GMing when I was 10, so 1980. I still remember sitting on the back porch of my house, rolling with the little plastic red dice, which you had to crayon in the numbers. And the first set that I ever got was the Expert Edition blue box. And since then, I have gone on, at last count, to have played in over 100 different tabletop RPG systems, either running or playing. I have written at least half a dozen homebrew and expansions for everything from Palladium to D&D to Top Secret SI to Top Secret 2nd Edition. Get that old school TSR cred. But I've kind of backed off now to focus more on the writing, purely because I wanted the audience larger than 4 to 8. But I seriously am still searching for the one system that really scratches all my itches and doesn't drive me crazy with complications. But I know it's a tabletop game, and therefore it will always drive me crazy. It's something. Stupid initiative system.
Okay. Thank you all. I'm going to start with an initial question, and this is just to sort of get a sense of where people's perspectives on the basic question, I think, which is how does traditional fiction, and I'm thinking here like books, movies, and so on, how does traditional fiction differ from storytelling in RPGs? And feel free to address either tabletop or video games or both, depending on your focus and preference. I'll start with MD. We'll come this way. We'll start with you, MD. We'll come this way.
Okay. Well, I'm a firm believer that when it comes to the elements of storytelling, RPGs are the perfect training ground for an author. It teaches you very quickly what works, what doesn't. When you're looking at board players across the table, it motivates you to do something to kind of liven things up. And it sort of goes back to the old joke of, if they're bored, rob them. If they have too much stuff, steal their stuff, burn down their house, or hit them with a wandering monster. Do anything that you can to keep it going. So it teaches you pacing very well. It teaches you to deal with the insanity of characters that won't cooperate. Who here has characters living in their head that will not cooperate? Okay, yeah. Dealing with gamers is like the way to train yourself how to deal with uncooperative characters and learn to go with the flow of the story. You may have a plot point, you're just never going to be sure how you're going to get there. And so all these things are what I see RPGs being outstanding training grounds, like I said, for an author, and finding ways to entertain and still tell a story and be open to the collaboration that is the kitchen or dining room table.
Herman?
Well, basically, most of the fantasy that I had pre-reading, like Silmarillion and all that, came from D&D, and it was a way to, I mean, not only was it playing the games, it was also reading the modules. If you take a look at some of those old modules, you can see there's a lot of storytelling there, and there's a lot of history thrown in there, and then they started adding maps and all of these other things. So in a way, it allows you to access things that you would normally not think of in your average mundane world. And think about, not only just delving dungeons, but going up and into mountainscapes and dealing with giants and dwarves and all that other stuff. And the nice thing about Dungeons and Dragons is that it's so open that, people can create new things, and that only adds to it. So, and of course, the whole role-play and simulation where you can kind of get into other characters' heads or be something other than you for a while. So, I hope that answered the question.
Joe?
No, okay, thank you. Okay. So when, I'll just go talk about when I'm DMing, one of the things I like to introduce is if I'm introducing something new, I also want to surround it and wrap it in with the familiar. That way, because you're doing the narrative, and in that narrative, you bring them forth with something that they understand and in something new. Like one of the things I do is I will leverage other characters from like movies or something like that, borrow their voice, and throw that voice into a character, and make that part of the narrative of telling that story. So, I know that voice is familiar because I borrowed that from some other movie or something like that. Brought it in, made it this character. It gives some warmth and feeling to the character as something. Oh, I know that, and then introduce the new, whatever the venture is. Just talking broadly here, but I'm always borrowing what other people did, bringing it in, and you kind of using it as red meat for telling my story. Of course, I'm not publishing anything, so I'll rip anything off. So,
Alex?
So I think what role-playing games and fiction have in common is a desire for drama and immersion, and what they have that differentiates them is agency. As the player of a role-playing game, whether it's video or tabletop, you have agency in the way that as the reader of a book, you do not. As the reader, you're merely along for the ride, and that ride may well be amazing in the hands of a good writer and may fully immerse you so much that you forget that you're along for the ride. But in a game, you genuinely are in control. And I think that is the essence of role-playing games is, and I say as much in my book, Arbiter of Worlds, that I call it the agency theory of fun, that the fun that comes from a tabletop game is the exercise of agency in a world with verisimilitude where your actions can have real consequences. And so as both a game designer, as a story creator working in that medium, and as a game master, I try and focus on maximizing the player's agency in the game world.
Okay. So just to give my thoughts on that, I agree basically with Alex's perspective that the fundamental distinction between traditional storytelling and RPGs is the introduction of player agency, which is not an element that you can have in traditional storytelling typically. I want to follow up on that a little bit and continue with the question, what is the role of player agency or choice in RPGs? How does this change the storytelling experience? And in particular, I want to draw attention both to video games and to tabletop role-playing, because the storytelling experience is present in both, but not necessarily the same in both. And basically ask the question, what complications does agency, or I shouldn't say necessarily complications, what new elements does agency introduce into the storytelling process that differentiate it between traditional RPG storytelling and traditional storytelling? Because I think that RPGs are definitely a storytelling medium in the sense of being a new artistic medium. Go ahead. Alex, we'll start with you.
Sure. So the primary difference, I think, is when you introduce agency, you have to switch from a story arc to what I call a story web. With an arc, there is a movement of A to B to C to D. You can follow the hero's journey, or the beat sheets that are common on the web, et cetera. We all know those formula. You can't do that in a role-playing game, and if you attempt to do so, you become what's critically called in the space a railroader. So you're a GM who's forcing the players to do what you want rather than letting them play the game. And many folks do run like that, but in my opinion, it detracts from the essence of the game. They're not there to be told your story. They're there to participate in creating their own story. How you achieve a story web rather than a story arc can be very challenging. As a player or as a game master in a tabletop role-playing game, you have limited time to prepare. You don't have a computer calculating everything for you. There's different approaches people take. Some people use procedural generation in real time at the table. Others use sandbox game worlds that they've built out in advance. Some people use prepared modules that they slot in. You see, interestingly enough, the same thing happens in video games, where you have games like No Man's Sky, which use procedurally generated universes to create vast areas of exploration, versus games such as Skyrim, which have a mix of procedurally generated landscapes combined with points of interest that have been carefully handcrafted. The challenge for the video game creators is, how do you control the pace at which they go through the content and the order in which they go through the content? Because players are accustomed to getting more powerful as they play the game, you can easily end up in a situation where they get slaughtered going to the wrong place early on, blame you for being a bad game designer, or later they go to the wrong place, and when they're too powerful, then they blame you again for being a bad game designer because now it's too easy, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an entire art. We could probably do an 8-hour discussion on just that one challenge. And it is, in many ways, the key challenge faced with the medium.
Joe?
I think with video games, I'll just simplify it. It's almost like a choose your adventure book when you're going back and forth. But the thing is you can only program it to do so much. Whereas in a tabletop with a human being, if the DM's up for the task, is able to adapt to the situation, because one of the things we find out that players just don't tend. You might prepare for a session, and it just goes, in a totally different direction, and you just got to roll with it. And I'm just going to throw this out here. I think people who build their own world and DM it are. They need to really have thick skin, because whatever their babies are, the players are just gonna beat on them, and you just gotta roll with that. I've tried that. I've played that before, where a friend did his own world, and in his head he had all this wonderful stuff, and we're running around like the Keystone Cops, just destroying all his love, crushing his soul.
It's a bunch of murder hobos.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, we weren't murder hobos. We were just not going in the direction he thought we'd go.
Oh.
You know, and it was just, you know, we being, you know, we were being good gamers, but we were just doing what we thought was needed to be done. And it was like, oh, go that way. We went, you know, we zigged when he thought we would zag, but you have to have a tough skin and be able to adapt to what the players are doing. And it's all about that telling the story experience, because matter of fact, you know, before coming out here, I actually looked in the AD&D, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, what they thought what players were, and they also described the DM as a player, and which is your role is you do everything else but the characters. And I said, oh, that's a good way of putting it. I'm playing so long, I just always skip that part, and just the idea that you are a player as long with the other players. So it's you do something and there's a reaction, and then do something and there's a reaction, and that's the storytelling. And if you are good on your feet as a DM, you'll be fantastic. Yeah.
Herman?
Well, the complications come in when you have a bunch of guys that just want to, you know, wail on each other, which I've had that before. I ended up killing both of them off. So, and then I went to McDonald's. As far as how does agency translate to storytelling? I kind of like create characters and I follow them through the world. I don't necessarily, you know, I know that they have certain amount of knowledge, and I know that they're going to do something, or they make a pact that they got to do something and they got to follow it. So I end up following the characters. The characters always make their own decisions, and then as the GM, I end up like killing off the red shirts whenever I need to. So how it gets into agency is if you've played it and if you've played it enough, I think you can kind of like create the character you want in your head and just simply follow them, and then you're just the one who's sort of writing down all the events that go on and all the decisions that they make to go along with it. I guess that's a good enough answer.
MD?
I guess I saw it recently. Somebody posted that an author said that I don't write what my characters do. I am like the guy that follows them around and writes the police report after the fact. In a lot of ways, that is dealing with gamers. They're never going to do what you think they're going to do, and if you think that, I got a bridge to sell you, because they will find a more unique way to deal with the situations you put in front of them than you could ever dream. And your only survival mechanism is to basically adapt and react and follow them around, giving them challenges that will hopefully nudge them back towards it, like trying to herd the team like billiard balls with cats on the table. But the agency of a gamer can be some of your biggest enemy, or it can be your greatest gift, because they will also flesh out whole sections of the world if you give them the permission to play in your sandbox. You as the GM are, like you said, you're dealing with everything but the characters. So give them the room or the rope in which to play or hang themselves with. And in the end, all you're doing is recording the incident for the authorities later. I have been a firm believer of, if you start with a module and the players are determined to tell a different story, chuck the module, follow the different story. Let them tell it, because that is the best cooperation you can get with giving them agency while also saving your sanity.
So just to follow up on that a little bit, with regard to tabletop gaming, when you're actually acting as a GM, you're all very much right that you have to have a not just a thick skin, but an ability to cope with the, but I had a whole story worked out reaction. They take a left turn when you wanted them to go right, or when you spent 2 days planning for them to go right. You have to be ready to improvise on the spot and say, okay, this is going to go in a new direction. Let me see how quickly I can come up with the direction for that. From my own gaming experience, the sort of iconic example of that I remembered is a game that I ran for my group in the early days of the setting for Sanctum of the Archmage. The team had identified a treasure trove that had a helm of opposite alignment in it. And they had identified the helm. They figured out what it was. They were adventuring in a dungeon that was being run by a succubus that was using it as a farm to manufacture new demons. And they came face to face with the succubus in battle, finally. And so our ranger looked at me and said, I grapple her, and slammed the helm of opposite alignment on her. So I got out the tables, I rolled it, he succeeded, and I suddenly was faced with the realization that I had to completely adapt the entire rest of the dungeon to, now they basically had the person running it was on their side, and was now lawful good succubus. She ended up being a regular feature in the games for years to come. So, on the question of agency in video games, that's a little bit, in one respect, more complicated because you don't have the ability you don't have someone there to adapt and try to improvise. As the game designer, you have to design a story web, to use Alex's terminology, that is broad enough to encompass the possibilities that people may make. You have to curtail them because you can't literally support every possibility. So you have to say, here's what what I'll support. How much do I need to support in order to give the players a feeling, or at least the illusion that they have choice and agency in the setting? And design a story that's not just a linear story, that's not just an arc, but that has multiple dimensions to it. So you need to design an overall story that encompasses variations in it in a way that there's really no analog in writing, for example, a novel. And that's the real complication that I see in designing a video game RPG, is that you need to generalize your concept of what a plot is to a kind of meta plot that is broad enough to encompass multiple different paths that may seem to have divergent and inconsistent choices in them, but that still amount to a satisfying story in all of those different variations.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
The one thing about when you get into the video games, like I said, you only have so much room on the hard drive, you only have so much space and memory, and you can only spend so much time developing a map and all the events that go with it, because when you get into that, it gets very, very complicated very, very quick. But when they started moving the Dungeons and Dragons into an MMO, it simplified Dungeons and Dragons way down, so that when you went into a dungeon, you may have had like 2 or 3 side quests, but it was a straight shot from the beginning to end. And what happened is like all MMO play, what happens really with all MMOs is it stops becoming about the story, it stops becoming about the experience, it then becomes about power leveling, loot gathering, and all this other stuff, and the immersive experience is gone. It's fun, but there's no immersion at all whatsoever. So, and the trick is to design a game that doesn't have that problem. MMOs are a different kind of experience from, like, for example, a single-player game, where there is basically the game master has set up the world in advance and all the options that are available. I mean, that's true to an extent with an MMO too, but there's still a dynamic element to MMOs. You have a team that's in there generating potentially new scenarios from one day to the next. But even so, it gets simplified down to, it still gets simplified down to like a straight shot. And even though they have open worlds, a lot of these quests have a beginning, end, and a boss fight. So it gets all very simplified very quickly, whereas with a larger game with something like a tabletop game with a human person behind there being the what's the arbiter is a good one, but being the one who sort of controls the environment and controls the events and the consequences. You can get way more immersed in that than you can anything that you put on your laptop.
So I'm going to differ with that, but this is just a side point, because I think it depends on the player and the style of the game design. There are role players, people who are firmly committed to, I'm in this for the story, I'm in this for the role playing. Yes, it'd be nice to power game, but that's not why I'm here. And then there are other people who will come in and power game. So that's a play style decision, as well as it's not necessarily something endemic to the medium as such.
That can also cause the party politics to implode as well, when you have the two people there to power game, and they're gonna, like I said before, murder hobo their way through everything.
Yeah.
You have two people there that just wanna be, the balanced player, get into it a little bit, have a little social fun, and then you suddenly get the thespian, who's going to go for the local gamer RPG gamers Oscar on their character and character development. But they also, if anything happens to that character, you can end up with a full-blown meltdown on top of it all.
Right.
So you have also that balance to go on, and that can be devastating for a group. I've actually watched 2 or 3 groups in my lifetime completely obliterate over that, or players go, nope, killing him, and actually you have PvP right in the group, and though me as a GM, I don't stop it. I basically let it sort itself out.
Alex?
Yeah, so I think all the problems that are being brought up here stem from an underlying unwillingness of players and GMs and game creators to accept that agency has to have consequences.
Yep.
So agency without consequences isn't actually agency, it's just fiddlesticks. So the problem with the thespian is that he wants to be able to influence the world with his cunning personality and charm up until things go wrong, and then he's very distraught about it. The power gamer is perfectly happy to grind away and kill all the monsters, but he totally expects that if he gets killed, he'll just respawn and he'll get to keep playing his character with all of his experience points. And he definitely isn't going to be happy if some NPC who in a living world would say, hey, I should probably do something about this psychopathic murder hobo that is destroying everything in his path, shows up and interrupts his fun, and on and on. So at least my own efforts have always been to accommodate all of those players by stressing that they're in a living world, and you're welcome to charm your way through it, you're welcome to fight your way through it, but whatever you do in that world, you will bear the consequences of that. Yep. And even when you get to MMOs, for instance, the game I've seen people most immersed in when it comes to MMOs is EVE Online, where when your ship gets blown up, your ship just got blown up. And you have never seen a person take a game more seriously than the person who has $10,000 of real-world money invested in their spaceship that just got blown up.
Wasn't it that the game that, about 10 years ago, they had a treaty failure happen, and over $16 million
Yes.
worth of real-world money
Real
went
world
up
money.
in digital sparkles in
Yep.
less than 24 hours.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
treaties, somebody forgot to pay a treaty.
Yeah.
And
Those
that's
people
then
were immersed.
World War I. It was literally World War I after that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So here, another question to follow up on some of the earlier comments. Is there a form of collaborative, emergent storytelling in RPGs that differs from the more directed storytelling that's typical in traditional fiction? Alex, do you want to start?
Sure. So there is, but the nature of what it is provokes really serious nerd fights. So I take a simulationist approach, so where the game master is the objective arbiter of the world, and then the players can do whatever they want within the world. There's another approach called story gaming, where the players are given sort of authorial power over the world. So an example I like to use to illustrate the difference. So your character is driving their car down the street. It's late at night, it's raining, and they see a spooky house. And in a traditional game, the player says, well, I'm just going to keep driving down the road because I'm trying to get somewhere, and that's just what I want to do. And in a story game, the player will turn to the GM and say, I'd like to have my character have a complication where my car breaks down, so I have to go into the house and ask for help, because I think that will be interesting. And then they get some reward in-game for doing an interesting thing. And so they're rewarded for making the story, better, more exciting. And so those are the two different ways you see in tabletop of how people want. One, it's up to the game master who creates a world that you play in, and then the other is, no, you're given some sort of authorial reward for participating in making the story more dramatic.
Zoinks.
Never heard of those story games? Yeah.
No, let's go on it. Yeah. Yeah, there's certain games. I mostly stuck with Dungeons and Dragons, because I find playing like superheroes, they became they actually became villains because they had a D&D mentality to modern day world consequences. That never went well, or
Sounds like it went great.
yeah.
Smash all the scenery for XP.
Yeah, it just never went well. Or like, I remember we played Shadowrun and we were supposed to be on a covert mission. Next thing, it's like urban renewal and like blocks are being destroyed.
If there are no witnesses, it's stealthy.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, I think we were supposed to deliver a note or something like that, and we like just dropped the note on the pile of ash. We're like, job done. So just so I'm gonna go just stick with D&D, and there's I think there's a big difference between someone who writes a novel and what happens in let's say a collaborative narrative direction of writing a story or putting a story together. I do know this, I was running, I had a throwaway character, and it was a goblin that was like raiding, and the character stopped the goblin and say, "What are you doing?" He had a goat, and he's like, "Wow," and he's like, I'm like going to begin a goat farm, and they're like, oh, okay, and they said, "Begin your goat farm," and they let him go, and I'm like, and all of a sudden he began a goat farm, and then all of a sudden they're just interacting with the goat farmer goblin, and and then we have for like 2 years we've had a running joke about goats, but yeah, it's just it was just something that was supposed to be thrown away, and all of a sudden became a big deal, and then all of a sudden it became a minor character became a major character in the plot. So it's all about just adapting and overcome. It's like a Marine, when you're a DM.
So those are ironic jokes.
Yes, yeah.
African fainting ironies.
I think collaborative has its limits. Like I said, you get a couple people are malicious, and next thing you know, you're killing them off and driving to McDonald's. So
I'm noticing a pattern here.
no goats.
Very sad.
I think that there's a limit. I think it has a lot to do with the actual people involved, the players involved. It's like anything. It's your audience. I'm not going to try and push my fantasy book on people who are hardcore, hard science, sci-fi. It's not going to flow. But you have people who really want to enjoy it. I think that's probably people who enjoy that, and you can trust them to not like go murder hobo, as everybody likes to say. I think that's something to look at. But at one point, there is usually like a big boss somewhere has to go down. And if they decide that, somebody decides that, big boss is an easy kill so we can get his loot, I don't know if I like that. So.
MD?
I'm going to I'm going to be like the problematic player at the table. And I'm going to kind of invert some of this.
So going to McDonald's.
Roll initiative, monkey boy. I'm going to invert this a little bit into something else, and since this is RPGs and fiction and its relation, something else that I've noticed on the audience side of the table. And this is, it's on the audience and it's on new writers coming out, especially those of us that are steeped in RPGs and have played, written, run. is that I'm noticing a dynamic shift in the tastes of the audience, but also in the writing quality that's coming out. Because like mentioned earlier, you can't have the same depth of experience with an online RPG. You have to limit it to, your story web can only be so deep.
Right.
And you can't really follow the narrative arc so well in those situations. But what I'm starting to notice, especially when I'm reading a lot of new indie authors coming up, is that this is stunting their growth as writers, because this is the source of a lot of their writing experience and their consumption. You know how they say, if you want to learn how to write good books, you have to go read good books. And I'm talking like the classics of literature, so you can at least identify kind of the techniques. But a lot of people now, both in the audience and in writers, are not getting that diet. They're getting what they can pack into a video game. And that is a pale shadow compared to what is out there for literature. And I think also that hurts the GMs too, if they don't have that sort of lexicon backed in their head of classic, stories. And I'm not saying that go back and read Dickens or Dumas or anything like that, helpful, but at the same time, I'm talking even just going back to the 70s and the 60s and digging into those things to develop what writing was like there and incorporating those ideas into their games. But for video games and those that stick primarily to that, I'm noticing very thin railroad plots a lot of times, and you do see characters that are acting like some of the worst of the gamer tropes out there, and are like, what are we really doing, or what kind of damage is being done sort of on both ends of it? Because they are technically related, but they are not the same form of storytelling. And it's leading to a real dynamic shift, I think, in both the audience and in writers out there. So there's me breaking the game for you.
Just real quick,
And that is,
what do you mean by audience? Because I also notice there's a third element these days, which there's the DM players and an actual audience.
Yeah,
You know,
that's-
like Critical Role, for example, which
Oh,
blows
that's
my
right.
mind. I'm like, I'd rather be playing.
Yeah, I would agree. I've seen a couple episodes of Critical Role over the time, or they got another one that's just a comedy show talking about riffs. But I'm talking about people that are going on Amazon and they're going onto fan sites and they're buying books that are obviously inspired by online RPGs. And although this is becoming almost to the point of a meta genre. You know, it's not a real true genre yet, but you do have things, are seeing the beginnings of it with lit RPG and gamer lit that's starting to happen. But I don't know how healthy some of it is to the whole breadth of genre fiction in general.
Well,
that is, if I can, because we have only a few minutes left, and I do want to give some time for a couple of audience questions, but that is a whole nother topic that we could do another panel on.
Okay, sorry. Like I
Very,
said, I'm
very,
the
very,
bad
no,
player.
very much. It's a great observation.
Thanks a lot.
But
You're welcome.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. Anybody have any?
I
Right
made
there?
my save.
When you guys talk about, when you guys talk about the characters involved in the game, we've all seen Knights at the Dinner Table and the stuff like that. We've all had players that are preferably like rules lawyers and things like that. How would someone want to deal with that as the GM? And then how does that reflect back into, say, someone trying to write from that aspect?
Well, first of all, it is a cooperative game. And if, as long as the players are cooperative and they're generally going in the same direction, there's harmony at the table. I've actually had, I started off, we moved to a new place, invited people, advertised, brought them into our house, and there was one guy who was just a murder hobo. He was gone in a couple sessions. Yeah, we just weeded him out. And now we have a small, we started off with 8, now we have 4. And the 4 we've been playing for a couple years now, and it's harmonious. We laugh, we have a great time. It's just, you got to play with the people that you're comfortable with. because hey, it's your time. It's your game. Be comfortable about who you're hanging around with. Just, unfortunately, sometimes online you don't have that choice, but it's just, you just gotta be comfortable with who you're hanging around and have the same mindset about what you want to accomplish in the game.
Can I answer his question?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so now that we've all beat up on gamers, and the Knights on the Dinner Table crowd, I actually want to stress there is one place I found gamers to be incredibly valuable as a writer. So, which is as follows. Tactics. So, in my Ascendant Star-Spangled Squadron graphic novel, it got reviewed by Kursova, and he was very kind to it, but he was particularly kind to the battle at the end, the climactic battle, which he said was one of the very best battles he'd ever read in any graphic novel of comics. And that battle was actually an almost page-by-page, panel-by-panel taken from the actual role-playing game Ascendant, where it had the players run through the scenario in the comic book. And so all the decisions that the heroes were making were the decisions that players with those characters made in the tactical situation, given the information the characters had at that time. So they were very realistic. They used actual tactics, but they weren't perfect in some narratively perfect way. They were perfect for what they knew was going on. And there was a lot of randomness and uncertainty because the game imposed that. And since I did that, a few of my friends have used similar things. I have a friend who's writing military fiction now, military fantasy fiction, and he started wargaming out his battles, and people have complimented, like, wow, your battles have really improved. This mass combat you're describing is fantastic. So all these sort of perversions that players bring to the table where they just don't quite do what you want or what you expect, you can turn that around and make it hugely useful to you in figuring out what people in that situation might actually do to win.
Time for one or two more questions. Start here.
Do you owe your players anything for basically constructing part of your novel?
No, actually, they paid me for the privilege by my Kickstarter. So they had to pay to be part of the campaign, yeah.
Did they know going into that what you do can be used?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question?
So as a DM, well, what I recognize is narratively, the hero's journey is immensely powerful. It's good for players to have setbacks. It's good for them to lose sometimes. But players at my table always want to win to the point, you know, they won't back down from fights, or they get very disappointed when they lose fights that I think they should. How do you help facilitate that? How do you help them realize that that's kind of part of the bigger plan?
So that, I'll give a quick answer to that, and then throw it to the group. In the very opening of the first Neverwinter Nights game that I created, it starts in a scene where the protagonist is attacked by a demon that he is absolutely no match for. And I set up a whole bunch of cues that said, you run away and this is the direction you run in. I found it fascinating how many players complained that they couldn't beat the demon. It's like, well, you're a level 1 nobody and you just got attacked by a level 8 demon. You run away. Why are you trying to fight it and thinking that you can beat it? I don't know that there's a good answer to that, other than that some people just need to be coaxed into understanding that losing can be part of the story and part of the experience. Guys?
My answer would be that there is no should lose. There is only did lose or didn't lose, in the same way that it isn't the case that Alexander the Great should have or shouldn't have won the Battle of Gaugamela. So the approach I take is simply, this is the world, these are the consequences, go. And sometimes they will win when I expect them to lose. Sometimes they will lose when I expect them to win. But what I stress is that in a long-term campaign, if you're faking it and letting them win, they will learn that, they'll figure it out, and then they will stop enjoying the game. I actually roll all of my dice in front of the players. I don't hide it. So if I roll a critical hit and max damage and I killed you, you just saw that. I can't fudge it. It just happened, you're dead. But likewise, if my supervillain rolls a 1 at the critical moment and he accidentally blows himself up in the most hilarious manner possible, he just blew himself up in the most hilarious manner possible. And by doing that, by making it totally transparent, my players have have come to embrace that as part of the adventure. So it does mean that sometimes things really don't go at all how sort of as an author you would want them to. But I think, as I said, since I think the essence of it is agency, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make.
If I may.
2 more minutes or 2 more questions? Or?
I was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
Could I answer, tack on to this a little bit first before you jumped in?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to loss, I'm going to cite something that happened to me with the only online MMORPG that I play, Guild Wars 2. They did an expansion pack where the first battle that came out in Secrets of the Obscure, you're taking on apparently the big bad right out of the bat, but you don't know that as a player. And nothing got me more infuriated than watching my character suddenly artificially slowed and unable to act, and I'm not able to do anything, and it kills you. And it's supposed to kill you because that's the first thing, because it sets up the story. The problem is walking in blind, you don't know that. What made me mad wasn't the fact that I lost in the fight, because they have other fights like that you have guaranteed losses throughout their expansion packs. But what pissed me off is it felt like the thing was cheating against me. And if you're going to let your characters or your players lose, you want to make sure they feel that the loss was earned. Because otherwise they're going to feel cheated and they're going to blame you as the GM. And especially if you're rigging the odds, then you're really getting it doubly so, and for cause.
Okay. Final question.
All right, this is a little bit messed up, but I don't think you can expect anything less. I just want to hear about the most ridiculous and hilarious character that one of y'all has ever seen at the table. It can be any one of you that answers.
I'll start off. My son created a pacifist barbarian. and did an amazing job. And it wasn't until you actually pushed him to the edge that he did something about it. It was just brilliant. Yeah.
I got stuck with a guy that decided to play a Chaos Mage in Palladium in a game of Rifts. And he liked using toys and circus equipment to summon and beat people up with. And his name on top of it all, for his superhero name, was Jeremy Jeffrey Patang. And he's played by a British guy with all the Monty Python humor that you could wring out of the show. That was absurd.
Mine was a trapper who couldn't spot, so we eventually pushed him into a trap.
Mine was a self-inflicted injury. It was I was creating an evil Dark Lord in my sort of Ursat Sumerian world, and I looked up, what would be a cool term for the great god, and it turns out that it's like Ng, and then Asur, and so that's what I named him without ever saying it out loud. And he was a black magician, and he ruled the Taint, and which was the area that had been blasted by black magic. Well, let me tell you, Nigashur, the black magician who rules the Taint, was not where I needed to be on that campaign. So,
It's such a cool day. Oh yeah.
On that note, I want to thank everybody for coming to the session, and thank you, and thank our panelists.